Morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon for most of you. It's morning here on the Pacific Coast. So I am going to go ahead and get started just because our tea times are only a 30-minute session, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to go over all of the content that we have today. This is a subject matter that I've never really gone over before within a tea time webinar. So I'm really excited to talk about it. I had a lot of fun creating this content and being able to bring it to all of our Johnson Consulting Group community. So first of all, hi, I'm Taylor. For anyone who has not joined a Tea Time webinar before, this is essentially a monthly thing that we do here with Performance Tracker and Johnson Consulting Group. Sometimes we have special guests that come in. Today, it's just going to be me discussing the importance and the actionability, if you will, of silent detractors and partial feedback. So focusing more on the survey side of Performance Tracker today and that customer experience. If anyone throughout the webinar has any questions, feel free to use either the Q&A option within Teams or just the chat. I'm more than happy to answer questions, and I will leave a few minutes at the end to address any of those as well. For anyone watching the recording, if you have questions as you are watching and we're no longer live, feel free to reach out to me either by phone or email. All my contact information is in this slide deck that you'll receive. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, what we're going to be reviewing, we're going to identify silent detractors within data. And what does that mean? First we need to define what a silent detractor is, and then figure out how to find them within your survey data. And honestly, even if you're not doing surveys, you can identify silent detractors by whether or not you're receiving any kind of feedback, whether that be verbal or maybe a thank you note from families. So we'll dive into that a little bit. Then we will go and I'm going to show you some statistics from the current year of data within Performance Tracker, show you what impact these quote unquote silent detractors or partially completed surveys are making into the data this year. Turning passes into promoters. Every, mid-scoring opportunity, so that would be a 7 or 8 on the net promoter scale, has the chance and the ability to become a promoter score in the future, whether that be, changing the family's perspective of the experience that they had, really empathizing with them. I'll go over some tips how you can turn the passive score into a promoter. Partial survey responses. So that's going to be anything that auto completes in our system. We do autocomplete survey responses 15 days after a survey has been started. And, all of that data that comes in, even though it is partially completed, it's still very actionable for your organization. And we want to make sure that, those are being addressed and not just left out there because a negative experience might not have been identified from it necessarily. So, and then we will go into some of the John DeJulius philosophy that we really hold to a very high standard here at Johnson Consulting Group, and becoming a zero risk organization, whether that be your individual funeral home, maybe you're a multi-rooftop organization, and you're, on the executive team at one of those organizations, and you're trying to really make everything zero risk, standardized throughout your company. So we'll go over some tips on that as well. And then, as always, we'll just conclude things with some resources that are available to you guys as Performance Tracker X clients, or even potential Performance Tracker X clients if some of you are thinking about coming onto the system. So I did want to start off today with a quote that I love. I have a very long history in customer experience and surveys specifically, but silent customers can be deadly. Encourage them to complain. And I always think that this is a hot take if you don't really know what the quote is saying. So basically, with every with every complaint that comes in, it's actually an opportunity to further a connection with a customer or family, and rectify the situation before it either becomes public online. Let's say if they're gonna take to a social media review and post about their experience that they had, or just word of mouth. I mean, honestly, all of us within this profession know that word of mouth, previously served, recommended by, those are all going to be the primary reasons how families are finding funeral homes. And then of course on the cemetery side as well, with it being heritage based, if even if your family is at a cemetery and that's kind of what is in the plan for your heritage, you might not want to continue it there if the experience has been really awful with customers. So my point in putting this in our survey, and or I'm sorry, in our presentation today, and kind of starting off with this, is just encourage feedback, regardless of the kind of feedback that's being said. Silence is really the most detrimental thing to your business. So, who are the silent detractors in customer experience? How can we identify some of these quote unquote silent detractors? So, a silent detractor is any family or customer who had a negative experience but chose not to voice their dissatisfaction. Now, this happens most often in funeral service because families have a very heightened, obviously, emotional state in grief. And during that emotional state, they are less likely to give feedback, even if something does go wrong. So, I mean, you can say it on the other side too of yes, they're very emotional and they might be extra vocal about a negative experience. I'm sure all the funeral directors on the call today have experienced something like that as well. But for someone who's not really a confrontational person and just kind of, is people pleaser and goes with the flow and tries to not rattle too much, they're going to stay silent until the service is over. Then they're going to take it out to their friends and family. They're going to talk about their experience they had. And, especially if everyone's local within the community, that's not a good look for your business and for receiving more families in the future. So, how can you identify some of these families? So, I mean, obviously, looking at those partially completed surveys that we provide, we do have a flag in our filter in the dashboard, where you can see if a survey was partially completed. I'll show you that in a little bit as well. Any skipped open-ended survey comments. So let's say someone goes through and marks all of the 1 through 5 rating scales. They answer that net promoter, which is required at the beginning of the survey, but then they don't leave any comments throughout the survey. That might be, they first of all, it's not the best sign because it means they weren't passionate enough about their experience to comment on it. Secondly, it could mean that there's potential negative feedback that they're just not sharing with your organization. A lot of times, consumers in general who are filling out surveys really don't see a point in providing that feedback. They don't think anyone of importance is going to read it. They don't think it's going to make systematic changes within an organization. So, I mean, especially with the survey fatigue that's happening in the modern world, and you get so many, surveys via email, and you stayed at a Marriott this weekend, and they sent one out. Whatever it may be, that survey fatigue could be a little bit overwhelming and really solidify the fact that, we're not going to really do anything with the feedback that we receive. The difference that Performance Tracker makes, the difference that within the death care profession makes, rather than obviously hospitality and, auto sales and all the other industries where you receive surveys for, is that personal touch. It's that sense of follow through and closing the loop with the families or the customers, and making sure that we do follow through on that experience. We continue that relationship and we nurture it over time. Selecting anything from 7 and 8 on that net promoter scale, again, a passive score. That's going to show, hey, we were, moderately satisfied with our experience. There was nothing above and beyond that made us say you deserve a 9 or a 10. I think that that's really where the needle can be moved the most on your customer experience scale, and just keeping that in mind as you're receiving scores. Avoided confrontation due to emotional state, and that nature in the funeral service. I mentioned this already, but just keep that in mind that, if someone is not naturally a confrontational person, that's definitely going to be a little bit even more muted during this emotional state of their life. Um, so even though families are appearing satisfied on paper, or I guess, complacent on paper, the reality is that you are at risk of receiving negative feedback by word of mouth or online, which, I mean, online, that's going to be extremely important, especially for our cremation clients who, I mean, SEO is the second most, the most popular way that families are finding cremation services. So Google, Facebook, Yelp, all of those sites. So, how impactful are partial surveys and passive scores? Now, this is actual data from Performance Tracker of this year. We have a 7.3% of all surveys completed are passive scoring surveys. So, again, that score of 7 or 8 on the Net Promoter Scale. 13.4% are partial surveys. So either they went through the whole survey and then just filled it all out and didn't hit submit at the end, or maybe they just clicked on the email and only gave you a Net Promoter Score. Anything that is partially completed is at 13.4% right now in our system. Then we have passive scoring Google reviews. I did a little bit of math on this because I want to make it clear that our Google Promote feature on Performance Tracker does only provide positive responding Net Promoter Scores with the opportunity to fill out a Google review. But you know what? That's not going to stop them from going to Google and filling out an online review, especially if they were dissatisfied with their experience. A lot of consumers are, very passionate about sharing it with the world. So what we do in Performance Tracker is, even though we only offer that promote feature to positive responding Net Promoter Scores, we pull in all of the data because we do have an API built with Google. So that means we can automatically receive all Google review data that is within a location. So that's anything from, a passive score, which is anything below 4, or a negative score on the 1 and 2 side. So 3, 4, and 1 and 2 is 10.8%. That might not seem like a lot, especially in this day and age where, let's face it, people are using the internet to complain. But it is still an impactful number, especially if you have a small community of people who are, limited in their options, and they choose to go with, location B instead of your location. So just keep that in mind. The passive scoring surveys piece I found very interesting because 7.3%, that seems relatively low again. That's a huge number of surveys. Even though it's a low percentage, it's still a huge amount of surveys for, nationwide in Canada and in Jamaica. Actually, this year we have a Jamaica client as well. So our passive scoring surveys, that can be anything from 7 and 8. They're most impactful because if you continue the conversation with families and you reach out to them and not only continue the relationship, but talk about their experience that they had, and hey, what could have made this more meaningful? Obviously, you're not going to want the funeral director to be the one to reach out to families and ask them that. You are going to want it to be a person of leadership to make it more impactful for the family. Like, hey, they care enough about my response to ask a little bit more. And I mean, certainly a passive scoring survey, that does not mean that they were necessarily dissatisfied enough to give you a low score, right? So there should be no problem in continuing that conversation with families and digging a little bit deeper. So it is going to be really important for the future of your business, as well as your current relationships with your current families. How to address silent detractors to improve business outcomes. Now, this is something that that you can do over time. I suggest you start doing it immediately, turning silent detractors into advocates. Obviously, there's nothing that can be done if you cannot receive feedback out of a family. Like you've tried to pull it out, everything. What can be done though is continuing the conversation with families, like what I was just saying with the passive scores. You can do that for families that have not responded to the survey at all. So I can certainly show you in a training session, if you guys want to book time with me, on how to see all of the surveys that were sent but not returned to your system. We can dive in deep to that. I suggest reaching out to those families and asking them for feedback. I mean, the whole point of the survey is to receive that feedback digitally, and that way you can have all of your scores compiled and look at data trends over time. But if you are doing it on an individual basis for someone who is ignoring the survey, I mean, that's what's going to really prevent a silent detractor from becoming a problem in the future. So show genuine care for a post-service feedback for their experience that they're continuing to have. Obviously, after a service, the grief doesn't stop. It's continuing, and you just want to know that or families just want to know that someone is there to support them. And even if you guys don't have an official grief support program, or even if support program that's going to reach out to families, it's always worth a lot to have an extra touch point with a location manager calling a family and saying, hey, I noticed you didn't complete your survey. Is there anything that I can do to assist you and help support? Also, I just want to know that can lead to a lot of pre-need sales as well by having that extra touch point. Transform quiet disappointment into gratitude for attentive follow-up. I mean, it really just it reiterates what I just said, is having gratitude for them coming into your funeral, and kind of turning it into that attentive follow-up that I'm talking about in terms of continuing the relationship with families. And then build a stronger community of trust by demonstrating responsiveness and compassion. This is going to be where that word of mouth comes in to play a lot. Even if a family had a mid experience with you, it wasn't really anything special. Maybe they're kind of running on autopilot because it is a time of grief. And I mean, when my family lost my grandpa last year, my aunt did all of the funeral arrangements, and they actually worked with one of our clients here in Arizona, Whitney and Murphy Funeral Home. And my aunt said by the end, she was like, I kind of blacked out, like the experience that I had, because I was just so like trying to get everything done, and then I was also dealing with my own grief, and um, uh, so she kind of let me know that feedback when she did receive her survey. And obviously she knows that I'm part of the team that sends out those surveys. So she was like, hey, I just wanted to say, like, I don't have a lot of memory of it happening. So that's why you want to share a great experience with not just the survey respondent, but with everyone at the funeral service, and build that stronger community. Now, making partial feedback actionable. This is really something that you can do in your dashboard to take a look at your partial responses, kind of analyze them. If you ever you need help analyzing partial feedback, I'm more than happy to help you. My services are, included with Performance Tracker. If you want a more experienced a death care professional to review those responses with you, I would highly encourage working with our business consulting team. They're amazing. They've been in the industry. I think I think one of our marketing gals recently told me it's like over 900 years of experience that all of our team has within death care. So keep that in mind if you want an experienced funeral professional to help walk you through the feedback that you're receiving. But I can certainly help you get that feedback and analyze it from a customer service perspective. So in your dashboard, if you go into the survey performance primary tab at the top of the page, and then you go into the list sub tab, which is that essentially an Excel sheet of all the survey responses that you've received within whatever time period you're filtered to. One of the additional filters that you can click on, so you would click on additional filters here at the very bottom, and what would come up is auto-completed survey. So you would just select yes on that, and then you would receive an entire list of the partially completed surveys. I do have an example of one of them up here from, and also, so this is not sensitive information that I'm sharing. I do have permission from Jake's Funeral Home here in Sun City, Arizona. So but this is just an example. They only answered the first 3 key questions. They answered a couple of the initial contact questions, and then they dropped off the survey. They didn't bother leaving comments, going through the questions. One of the things that you can do to prevent a partial survey from happening is set clear expectations with families when you're mentioning the survey to them. So one of the things that I do in my arranger trainings with teams is making sure that they know the kind of verbiage they should be using with families when the opportune moment, or when the appropriate moment, I should say, is for them to mention the survey to families. But they should always be mentioning the survey to families that, the feedback is valuable. It goes directly to the leadership team, and it is used. So when they're being thanked by families, that's really the most appropriate time. And mentioning that the digital survey does take anywhere between 7 to 10 minutes to complete. It is a longer survey. We do that very intentionally. That way we can receive pretty, granular, detailed data in a service experience. It's not just, oh, would you recommend us? And then you're done. Are you satisfied overall? We're done. We go into initial contact. We go into questions that are specific to the arranger. So that individual can kind of have their metrics that they need to improve on over time. We do overall staff and services, so not just the arranging funeral director, but everyone that they interacted with on site. And then we have an operations section. So facilities and vehicles for funeral homes. And then for cemeteries, it asks about the grounds, the pathways, walkways, flowers, all of that. So we were really intentional when designing the questions of this survey. Yes, it does take a little bit extra time for families to complete, but that data that they receive is invaluable. And something else about the partially completed surveys too. If you're an organization that you really are valuing a short survey, you want to just send out 1 or 2 questions, what we refer to it in internally here as an abbreviated survey. If you want to send something like that out, you can send our survey out still. It'll just people who want to respond to it will come back as a partial survey flag. So your team should always be following up with these partial responses too, not just a fully completed response. So a quick outreach prevents the spread of a negative experience. That's a huge benefit of the digital survey that our system uses, because you're receiving that feedback in real time. Whenever someone submits a response, you receive an alert email saying that the survey was responded to and there is something to address. We even created a passive alert within the last, I think, year and a half. It's been since we launched that, because we were noticing that not having an alert for the 7 and 8 scores, there's still a lot of actionable feedback on those types of scores. So even those come through via email now too, and it's much more effective than the traditional paper survey where you have to wait for it to be mailed by sometimes a third party vendor. It's going to take even longer, and then the obviously the process of them receiving the paper, filling it out, mailing it back, getting back to the data entry team and entering it into the system, that could take several months, like in total. So that could be old feedback. They could have gone to Google by then and already disparaged organization online. They could have already talked to their friends and family. It could have already made the impact. So just keeping that in mind, that the digital survey is really a great benefit, and it saves all of our clients money as well, because digital is obviously cheaper than actually physically mailing paper. So lot of benefits to digital. Families avoid conflict during grief. It's something I already addressed. I'm not going to go over that again. And then low complaints do not mean high satisfaction. That's a super important point. It actually comes directly from John DeJulius. I'm sorry, it's a tongue twister. Who is kind of like the prophet here at Johnson Consulting Group for guidance on customer service. Both of our senior business consultants have been certified by the DeJulius Group on customer experience. There's a book called The Customer Revolution that is really impactful to it's one of those things that I was actually given it when I started here at Johnson, and I read it, and it was very impactful for me and my perspective on customer experience. And that's coming from someone who has over 15 years with customer experience and hospitality. So it's definitely worth a read. There's a lot of great ways to manage feedback in there, to manage the customer experience overall. But a low amount of complaints. Let's say you log into your dashboard, you've got a great net promoter score. You're at like 99, and then your total value index is like 75. That's a really great total value index. And you're thinking, okay, everything's great. But then you look at your response rate and it's, 30%. Well, 30% is a really good response rate. It's the minimum required in order to be eligible for our awards that we give out at the end of the year for excellence in customer service. However, you need to remember that that's only 30% of families that have responded to surveys. That means there's a potential 70% of your families out there that are staying silent, not providing their feedback, and you don't know. I mean, that could not equate to a high satisfaction level for that amount of people. So just keep that in mind as you're, seeing your survey responses. I mean, our response rates are really outstanding, especially this year. We have a couple of organizations right now that are up in the 70s, which is just insane. So, but even so, they still have 30% of their families not responding to surveys, and there's that risk for the silent detractor still in play. So just keep that in mind when you are looking at your data and thinking about, hey, should I reach out to this family? It's definitely worth it. So talking more about the DeJulius Group, I took this directly from their customer experience blog. So John DeJulius writes this himself. He also has a podcast called the Customer Experience Revolution, similar to the book. But there's so many different opportunities to like just get this knowledge around customer experience from their organization. But it's kind of identifying zero risk. I myself didn't really understand zero risk until I actually read this book and really dove into it. Zero risk doesn't mean that your organization never drops the ball. It means that when the ball is dropped, your employees handle it appropriately and make it right with the customer. A couple of tea time webinar sessions ago, I think it was earlier this year, I did the importance of having a standard operating procedure. On the operation side, or similar to the operation side with an SOP, you want to have a plan in place for how to handle a customer defect that happens. Obviously want to deviate from that protocol whenever is appropriate in order to make the family happy and salvage that relationship. But there should be a standard skeleton, if you will, of how that process should be handled. There should be specific employees that are trained to handle service defects. One of the things that the business consulting team here at Johnson offers is a ranger training with our consultant Lacey Robinson. She's really awesome. She goes on site and does training with funeral directors. If that's something anyone is interested in, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I'll get you over to Lacey and have her tell you more about it. But I also do a ranger trainings as well. I want to point that out, but mine is centered around performance tracker. So mine is to make sure that the survey is being handled appropriately, and that all the arrangers know how to address the survey, handle customer experience in general, and manage their dashboard. So if you want to get more in depth with how to, be a great performing funeral director, you can reach out to Lacey. Knowing where a funeral home drops the ball most often, another thing that Performance Tracker does for you, it identifies those problem areas by looking at the responded feedback. And then again, if you reach out to families and receive that feedback from them, from the silent detractors, I should say, from the ones who have not responded to the survey, then you can even have more insight into what areas of opportunity are available, and identify any of those holes that there may be in your customer experience. Have systems and processes in place to help reduce issues from happening in the first place. Again, going back to that standard operating procedure on the operations side, highly recommend having that. And I do have a template for just a sample standard operating procedure within a funeral home. If you're interested in doing that, I created that with our consulting team a couple of months ago when we did the webinar on it. And then have a service recovery system and tools that your employees can use to make it right when defects happen. That's going to be something again that happens in training, but also just from a leadership standpoint, having those weekly staff meetings or however often you guys meet, and going over defects as a group, not calling out individuals in a group setting. I don't recommend doing that necessarily, but talking more generally about some problems that could be occurring, and just doing that in a huddle format with your team. That's something we actually do here at Johnson Consulting Group as well. We have a weekly huddle about it. So I could dive into more of this information all day, but we are up on time. I do just want to point out a couple of the extra slides I have in my presentation here, and they are resources for you guys to use. These are some options that can be used for Johnson Consulting Group. If you're interested in attending one of our leadership and management workshops, it's a 3-day on-site development course for maybe a budding leader within your organization, that you want them to really have that coaching and development. Definitely have them come to one of our sessions. We do one per quarter, I believe. And then CX workshops, we do virtual business coaching or assessments, and we can do an incentive compensation plan with Performance Tracker. Take your data and devise a bonus program around actual performance within the data, both on the survey side and the sales side. So if you guys are interested in any of those opportunities with our business consulting group, just let me know. Be happy to help you. Something that we added to the dashboard recently under our support and resources tabs is our webinar archive. So all of the tea times that I've done, we started this, about a little over a year ago now. So this is actually our 12th tea time in total. I encourage you guys to go back and watch based on any subjects that really jump out to you. You can see I've got a lot of guests that came in. We've got this annual Trends and Insights release. Both Jake Johnson and Vince Roberge were on that. So go ahead and rewatch those if you'd like, or introduce yourself to them if you haven't seen them before. As always, our support team is available to you guys, 5 days a week, and you can message us anytime, 24/7, and we'll receive your response when we're in office. But support at j3techsolutions.com is who you want to email, or our support ticket that you can submit within the dashboard if that's easier for you if you're already logged in. You can also email me directly. I'm more than happy to help you, but this ensures that our entire team has eyes on your issue and it will be resolved as soon as possible. And then just a reminder that we do want to hear from you if anyone has any requests or suggestions for tea time subject matter. We've got a whole bank of options available, and I kind of take what's most popular and in demand. So don't stay quiet. Don't be a silent detractor. If you have feedback for me on these webinars, please let me know. And I want to show you guys what you want to see for them. So I am going to go ahead and let you guys go. We're 4 minutes over. I apologize for that. And I appreciate you all taking the time to join time today. I hope you all have a great afternoon. And for anyone who was not able to join live, you will receive this slide deck as well as the recorded presentation later today. So thank you all and have a good afternoon.